Psychoanalysis and philosophy, crisis at work. Generally, we apply psychoanalysis to the personal life. Focus is usually more on the intrapsychic life and on what happens in the family or in very close emotional relationships. Psychoanalysis generally doesn't get applied adequately to the work situation, to the professional area of life, unless someone comes to therapy primarily with a problem of the professional area. Else, application of psychoanalysis to the professional area is a light touch affair. Focus of psychoanalytic theory and practice both usually has been on early childhood and the family situation. Some psychoanalysts, like Alfred Adler, who tried to bring in society the class dimension to psychoanalysis, he stands out. So does Lacan, who brought in the concept of the big other, and so do some other psychoanalysts who brought in society at large into psychoanalysis. Wilfred Bion did some pioneering work when he studied psychoanalysis applied to groups. And that has deep implications, enormous implications, in fact, of applying psychoanalysis to groups. Groups need not be groups in organizations and industry. It can be a group in an NGO. It can be a social group of a caste or a community. It can be a social group of environmentalists or feminists. It can be a social group of conservatives or pro-right. Any group it can be, but psychoanalysis can be used to understand, heal, and make better the groups. However, after Bion, and even while Bion was living, after early Bion, the group deployment of psychoanalysis waned out. One of the casualties of that waning was group therapy anchored in psychoanalysis. Countries like India need low-cost group therapy. One of the models can be group therapy based upon psychoanalysis. That also calls for a revisit to application of psychoanalysis to groups. Our discussion today will go into applying psychoanalysis to the work situation. And this work situation has both the situations. The situation of the single individual, what he feels when he is alone at work, and what he feels while he is in a group situation. And there are crises at work of both types, individual intrapsychic crisis as well as group crisis. At work, there is intergroup conflict also, because there is not one group, but many groups in the organization. And apart from the intra-group conflict, there is also an intergroup conflict. And at all the three levels, intrapsychic, intragroup, and intergroup. In fact, four you can say: intrapsychic, interpersonal, intragroup, and intergroup. All the four levels, psychoanalysis can be applied very profitably. However, when we talk about work situation and the crises at work, the difficulties at work that an individual faces in psychological terms, it's not easy to be within the confines of psychoanalysis. Socio-economic issues, cultural issues, existential issues seep into the discussion. And so our discussion today has been put under the title of psychoanalysis and philosophy and not strictly under psychoanalysis. In our discussion, we will go through both psychoanalytic aspect of the discussion, socio-cultural aspect of the discussion, philosophical and spiritual aspect of the discussion. So let us enter into crisis at work. At work, crisis is indeed at work. How do we look at work? Let us look at children and adults. There is an old saying, children walk to school and they run back home. There is an old saying, children walk to school and they run back home. Obviously, they don't like work. It is painful until they form enough relationships, till they find enough games, enough enjoyment in the school. This is the situation. They walk to school and they run back home. And even after they get used to the school, they start enjoying the school. By and large, for most children, this is still the situation. Initially, it is a situation between heaven and hell. The home looks like heaven and the school looks like hell. Slowly, the heaven at home recedes and the hell at school also recedes, and the distance between the two reduces. And children start enjoying school. One group which has deep psychoanalytic difficulties, either inside of them or have a very difficult home or school, or if the school is very difficult, that group may not enjoy school at any point in time, but for majority of children, they start enjoying school after some time, and yet this applies. Children walk to school and they run back home. Psychoanalytically speaking, it is like a relief from torture as they are released. The torture of the fear of authority figures, the torture of being confined and being held, the torture of the mind being disciplined, the pain of learning, the pain of performance, the shame of non-performance, the frustrations and failures in the groups, the narcissistic injury of not making it in groups as one wants. For some children, it is like the classical reverie and torture state. That the school looks like a torture and the release looks like one can go back to reverie and enjoy the bliss at the breast. So this is true for most children for most of the time, and this is true to some degree till one gets into college. In most countries, this would be true. Children walk to school and they run back home. For men, it is not very different. You can say men walk to work and they run back home in a psychological sense. In a physical sense, of course, one is running both ways. But in terms of enthusiasm and looking forward to, men psychologically walk to work and they run back home. At work, you often hear only 10 minutes to go for recess, as though a period of torture is about to end after 10 minutes and you will go into the realm of freedom, reverie, and bliss at the breast at the recess. We hear, thank God it is Friday, the torture is ending, and for 2 days we'll be away from this torture of work. Vacation is coming. On the whole, we see few people enjoy work and see work as a pleasure. For most people, work is pain, a necessary pain to purchase pleasure. And therefore, it's necessary to know intrapsychically what has happened in these two groups. The group that enjoys work is a group that does not have very difficult authority figure issues. It's a group that has been able to be flexible, practical, and maintain one's self-esteem in the face of possible defeat, in the face of uncertainty. It is a group which has been able to transfer the pleasure of bliss at the breast into the zone of reality. So as children, as they separated from the bliss at the breast and moved towards reality, they were able to carry that pleasure into reality. And it is a group with very high ego strength, very high resilience and pragmatism, very high confidence to face the world. And the other group is the fragile group, which constitutes 75% of humanity. It is a group which is fragile at work, may not be fragile in a DSM sense, but it is fragile at work. Does not have the risk-taking ability, the confidence, the resilience, the pragmatism, the practicality, takes things to heart, have difficult authority figure relationships, and regardless of how much intellect or innovation or creativity they have, the anxiety at work is very palpable. And for them, work is a pain. They may get used to it. They may learn how to repress it and generate pleasure on top of it. But in the unconscious, the pain continuously gets generated and felt. They may develop very prudent and productive masochism, sublimated masochism, but yet some pain remains generated in the unconscious, felt in the unconscious, untransformed, and therefore repressed. This being the situation, what do people feel about work in general? One group would say, I wish I did not have to work, but bad luck I have to. Second group would say, I want to work, but don't know what to do. Third group, I want to work, but I'm not finding a good place to work. It is very true. The second is very true, unless, the first is very common, the most popular. Second is about not knowing what to do. And unless one takes a deep inner journey and experiments with life, this cannot be addressed. Third, I want to work, For second one, I want to work but don't know what to do. It's better to go for career counseling, for therapy. Give time for self-exploration, experimentation with work and find out over a period of time. And this takes 2 years. It cannot be done in a week or two. Because intellectual thinking can be done in 2 weeks. But experimentation takes time because usually you arrive at 4 or 5 preferences which then have to be experimented out. I want to work, but I'm not finding a good place to work. That is true for most developing countries. Very few good workplaces to work. Most places are glorified slave camps. Then you have a group where people want to work, they work, but they are better working alone than with others. They are tired of handling others, of the politics of others, of the sabotage of others, and of the intrapsychic difficulty of just being with others. Fifth, I don't feel another fifth group. I don't feel attracted to corporate work. I would rather do non-profit work, something in sports or arts or spirituality. Perfectly okay if you feel so. It's a myth of our times that if you don't get along in the corporate environment, something is wrong with you. It's a complete myth. The corporate culture is one among many possible cultures where one can like or not like to work. The corporate life is one option among many options. It is not a gold standard that if you cannot work in the corporate, something is wrong with you. Completely false. But this is something prevalent in society today. And unless one goes to a career counselor or a therapist or a spiritual guru, it's very difficult for someone to arrive at this truth and believe in it without reservation. There's one more group which says, what if I don't like anything to do? What if I don't like to do anything? This opens up a philosophical question, not a psychoanalytic question. One of my teachers used to say, if you go to the market to buy something, and if you don't like anything, you don't like anything, you just come back without buying. You don't have to buy just because you went to buy. Same is true about work. You don't have to work just because you have got into an age for working. It's quite possible all that is on offer, you don't like anything of it and therefore you don't do anything. That does not necessarily mean you are lazy or good for nothing. One only has to do an honest reflection. If I am not doing something because I don't like anything, or am I not doing something because I'm using I don't like anything just as a cover to cover up my laziness and psychopathology? If the answer is that it's not a cover, it's a genuine choice, nothing wrong with it. This social position that you cannot not like anything to do comes from utilitarianism. It's not something which is very high in ideals. Utilitarianism is a very pragmatic concept. And utilitarianism says that you must do something. If you don't like something, completely do something that you least dislike. So if one is not doing the thing out of pathology, it's perfectly okay. You don't have to believe in utilitarianism just because it is the prevalent philosophy in the spirit of the age, rather which is dictating the spirit of the age. Corporate compatibility as a measure of health is a completely wrong concept. The corporate situation is a very recent and artificial situation which has come up in human evolution. Far from gold standard, it's not even an iron standard. The corporate culture is shot through and through with 1,000 defects. So this secret desire of conformity, of making everyone conform to the corporate environment, is a pathological desire for conformity. This is what the macro situation and macro responses of people and macro issues related to work are. Now let us go to what people say at work. Those who decide to work, get work and report at work and start doing work. Most people say, I don't like the work given to me. I have a problem with that. And that's a genuine problem, because if you put together all the interesting work in the world, that is hardly 25% of total work in the world. You just don't have adequate volume of interesting work to be given to people. It's 75% of work which would be not very interesting to anybody has to be given to somebody. And for the first 5 to 7 years of life, that is what comes to you because of being at the lower part of the hierarchy. So the problem is true, but it's a no solution problem. Much of the work which human beings do today should be done only by robots. But till that happens, somebody has to do it, and then the junior has to do it because of the hierarchy. So it is a problem which is true, but no solution. Power given to me is too less. It's a genuine problem which has a solution, but human selfishness does not allow it to be practiced. Devolution of power downwards is necessary for all organizations. Does not happen at any organization, happens at very few, if at all, in exceptions. So it's a genuine problem where solution is possible, but very difficult, and so has not come and unlikely to come unless society actually debates it intensely. I fear competition. That has to be dealt with in therapy. It's an intrapsychic issue, mostly related to I am not good enough, catastrophic thinking, and difficulty of stabilizing the self-esteem in the optimum zone. Occasionally involving envy and narcissistic rage. Work capability. This is a real HR issue, because in developing countries, most students who come out of colleges don't really have the capability to work, although they have the certificate that they have the capability. And so it takes some time. And initially there's disappointment that I thought I was capable of working, but I have to learn so many things that I realize I'm not actually capable of working right away. And I need to further train myself before I can actually start working to the full capacity. And this is a problem of colleges in the developing countries, partly in the developed countries. The education has become too theoretical, completely divorced from real life work. And the problem is of faculty members, and I call it the BA, MA, PhD problem. Those who have never been in the industry or politics or police or administration, something to do with hard real life. People who have never been there for 5 years, 10 years, they become faculty members, and then the difficulty starts, right? Because they have never seen anything apart from the college campus, which is a completely protected, limited and artificial situation in one way. Fear of authority figure and unconscious avoidance of authority figures, unconscious avoidance of work, unconscious avoidance of groups. This is an intrapsychic problem And we see there the fear of authority figures largely is because of unresolved Oedipus or the split being open, and worse when both of them are at work. Catastrophic thinking is a very important issue, and this does not allow most people to realize their full potential. The moment any work is given, the catastrophic thinking starts automatically in the unconscious mind, as though you will not be able to do it, it is too complicated, too difficult, and then you will, after failure, you will lose the job, you will go destitute, and you will face the ultimate catastrophe of endless humiliation, endless pain, and death. And this is a completely unrealistic thinking. But this is at the root of psychological troubles of thousands of people in the world, billions of people in the world. This is at the root of very talented people not being able to perform in organizations. Because this creates so much of anxiety that you are not able to use your talents, your capabilities in the organization. Many people leave organizations, are never able to work because of this. Catastrophic thinking happens in 7 steps, and at the root is I am not good enough. Evolutionarily speaking, catastrophic thinking had an evolutionary advantage. If you over prepare for catastrophe, chances of survival increase. But when it goes out of control, instead of being profitable, it becomes dysfunctional and it ruins complete careers. In fact, billions of people have their careers ruined or stagnated because of catastrophe. The quality of life at the workplace goes down to the bottom because of catastrophic thinking, because all the time you are full of anxiety, rage, pain, and the quality of life is down on a -10 to +10 spectrum. You are always moving between -7 and -5. If you want to know more about catastrophic thinking, I have a separate recording, a separate episode, which explains the 7 steps involved in catastrophic thinking. And how to overcome it. The opposite of it is catastrophic thinking. Positive thinking. Catastrophic thinking is very negative thinking. Catastrophic is positive thinking. Instead of fantasizing negatively, you fantasize positively. And after you do enough and overcome catastrophic thinking, you can then look at the being in the reality zone. Neither catastrophic nor catastrophic. But initially, to move away from catastrophic, it is easier to get into catastrophic and then into reality. Group dynamics is a very important element. And Wilfred Bion studied groups very intensely from a psychoanalytic perspective. Bion says that any group in the organization which has been given a task to perform gets into 2 states. Either it is in the rational state of trying to achieve its objective and is busy working as it should. When the group is in that state, Bion calls that state the state of the work group. The group is actually in the work state and working fine, rationally, objectively. All energies and mind of every person in the group dedicated to the task. The group is in the state of the work group. But Bion says, more often than not, the group is not in this state of objectivity, rationality, productivity. Rather, unconscious elements activate in the members of the group, and that takes the group in a dysfunctional state, and beyond calls those dysfunctional states by a category name basic assumptions group. And there are three states under this basic assumptions group into which the group gets. The first is fight and flight. The group feels it is in danger from another group or somebody, and either everyone wants to leave or everyone wants to fight, or there are some who want to leave and some who want to fight, but essentially the group is into a fight or flight situation. So one state that a basic assumptions group can get into is fight or flight. And you can see in the group members, some are full of anxiety and some are full of rage. Some ready for flight and some ready for fight. So this is the first fight or flight state into which the group can get. Second, the group can get into what Beyond calls dependency. The group becomes completely dependent on either the leader or some person in the group, as though that person is the savior. So everyone regresses to the child and projects an omnipotent parent on one member of the group, or at times two members of the group. There is a complete dependence. Third state the group can get into is the state of pairing, where two members of the group become most productive. They keep talking, they keep deciding, they keep generating ideas, and the rest of the group just looks at them in dependence and wonder. And it is as though the two members are mating and the children are looking at them. It's like the replay of the primal scene. Children are looking at parents who are mating. And Beyond says, when the adult, objective, rational part of us is at work, of all the group members, the group becomes the work group. And when the unconscious parts of members become active and they overshadow the adult in all the members, the group goes into one of the states, one of the three states of either fight, flight, dependency, or pairing. And all the three states as a category word, Beyond uses the word basic assumptions group to cover all these three states. And therefore, the goal is to keep the group in the state of a work group. And if the group has gone into a basic assumptions state, then how to bring it back to the work group state. This is what is the challenge in most organizations. And this getting into the basic assumptions group and how to get out of it is so deep and so psychoanalytically rooted that using ordinary cognitive techniques or behavioral techniques, we can't address the challenge. What others are the complaints at work that people make, usually in the first 5 years? The frustration at work. Everything does not happen as one wishes. There are too many hiccups, too many uncertainties, too many bureaucratic hurdles. There is the pain of work itself, which is true, because often we are asked to do something we have not done before and it's painful to learn it. The fame is not there at work. It's the top management which gets all the limelight, and the fame due to people at the bottom is not there. That's very, very frustrating, because we all have a very strong desire for fame. Desire for credit and desire for fame are very strong desires which are frustrated at work. The problem of people who are frustrated at work and very cunning and how they trouble us, that's a very big problem at work. Fairness and creativity is absent at work. Very few people are creative. Most of them are doing repeated work, and there is no sense of fairness in distribution of rewards, distribution of credit, distribution of fame, or appreciation or encouragement to the talented. They are absent at work. Very few workplaces don't have lack of fairness. All the five are true, and there are solutions only if somebody is willing to implement them. And one way to make it happen is to make it in public and social discourse. Once you bring all these issues in social discourse, some change will happen in organizations and maybe even government policy. Our video is one small effort in that area. The first 1,000 days at work are particularly problematic for everyone, and one should not get frustrated because one is frustrated. The frustration, the feeling that I don't know adequately enough, that I have yet to learn the entire tricks and trade of the work, that people, the seniors who are able to fool me, get information out of me without my knowing it, not getting fame, not getting credit, not getting work which is intellectually stimulating enough, getting work which is beneath one's dignity or one's qualification. All of those are natural frustrations of the first 1,000 days where one is trying to figure out the workplace. So take 1,000 days to figure out the work environment, because till now you have been only in the academic environment, and it will take 1,000 days to find out and figure out the intricacies of the work environment, to find out your strengths and weaknesses, and to find out what type of work you like or don't like, and what type of people you can work or don't work. So give yourself time, be at ease. Everyone needs 1,000 days to figure out the work environment, the professional environment. And it's a long innings. We all work 25 to 35 years, and to need 3 years to prepare for 25 years is not too much to ask. It's a reasonable demand. So give yourself 2 to 3 years to figure out the work environment, figure out what you like or don't like, what kind of people you can work with or don't work with, and then take your call where you wish to work for the remaining 25 years. Thank God it is Friday, which means you actually live only on weekends. It's a very tragic situation to be in. And this is the fate of a majority, 70% of humanity, that they live only in weekends and in vacations. Everyday life is a torture. And they realize very early that life is over. This is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. And to be in a state of torture and to know this is how it's going to be for the rest of your life is unbearable. And people are bearing the unbearable. And therefore, most are only waiting for retirement. And when that happens, one has to go into the inner world, inner journey, to find out what one likes and how it can be remedied, how you can address this situation that life is over. It's going to be, as Schopenhauer says, endless pain to a painful end. So one has to get out of it by going for career counseling, therapy, retraining oneself, being clear about oneself, and not have a life where you live only at weekends. And for a small minority for whom there is no way out of this, there in therapy one has to do a massive reconciliation, reality acceptance, mourning that the dream of a king has ended. One important element at work is the banality. So what are the feelings that one feels at workplace? Frustration, anger, pain, repeated disappointment leading to resignation. finding that in reality, there isn't enough volume of good work to be distributed to everyone. In reality, that privilege and feudalism are at work. It's not a fair meritocracy. To know that I don't know enough, despite my qualifications, to know that I am naive enough and people with less educational qualifications but more experience can fool me by their practical tricks. To know that there is a long way to the top and no easy road to fame. Very common feelings at work. If you feel them, don't get frustrated about it. Very common feelings. Now let us look at the psychoanalytic part of it. What happens at work? First, there is Oedipal anxiety of castration related to authority figures. There is a fear and terror of attack of the authority figures. And this has to be addressed in therapy. Deeper than the Oedipal fear of castration and attack by the authority figure, there is a paranoid schizoid anxiety that client talks about. And beyond also found these psychotic mechanisms are at work at the workplace. There is a constant fear of attack of the authority figure or constant fear of attack by anyone and everyone. The two are different. If it is a constant fear of attack by the authority figure, most likely we are dealing with Oedipal anxiety. But if there is a constant fear of attack by everyone and anyone, and a constant fear that attack can come at any time, probably we are dealing with paranoid schizoid anxiety, which is much deeper and much earlier than the Oedipal anxiety. There is a constant feeling of I am not good enough. It can be rooted in early life object loss, abandonment, or I am not good enough drilled into the child by parents who are either harsh, narcissistic, or in their own superiority complex. There can be an unbearable pain of humiliation of defeat. And this will make a person avoid all competition, which is not possible at the workplace. You will always be in competition with somebody. But if you are in competition with somebody, sometimes you lose and sometimes you win. If winning makes you go ecstatic and you go manic and arrogant, and if defeat makes you go into a state of unbearable pain, then you cannot participate in any competition healthily. One has to have the sportsman spirit and stability of the ego. There are feelings of pain, anger, anxiety related to authority figures or just being at work because of just one's condition in the organization. There also is sexuality at work, which is excited when you look at objects of sexuality, heterosexual or homosexual. And then there is repression. And there is also a very big blackmailing circuit at work at most organizations. That they wait for you to commit some mistake and then use it as blackmailing thing. And often it can be blackmailing related to some sexual relationships. So one has to be vigilant about this part in the organizations. So there is an organizational part of sexual circuits and the blackmailing circuits, but intrapsychically speaking, there are problems related to activation of sexuality and repression of sexuality at workplace. Many workplaces have hidden homosexual groups which meet and party. And when this happens, the control of organization goes out of the organization, because what happens in this group decides the fate of the organization. And in such a situation, one feels that everyone knows what you talk, but you don't know what everyone talks. There is a one-way flow. And this is because, this can be because, not it necessarily is, but it can be because there is a homosexual circuit which is strongly bound with each other, but which sees you as the other. So heterosexual person in a homosexually controlled organization finds it very difficult because there is a one-way flow of information, one-way flow of traffic, one-way flow of credit, one-way flow of manipulation, one-way flow of fame, rewards. So if you feel it that way, look around to find if you are not surrounded by a homosexual group. There can be intense envy and narcissistic rage, which can turn destructive to others. And if it cannot go out, it can turn back on oneself and create psychosomatic or cognitive difficulties for oneself. Many people have this issue that they feel they are born CEOs. They can't take orders from anybody. They cannot work for anybody. And they feel what the CEO is getting is rightfully theirs. This creates unbearable envy and narcissistic rage. And that has to be dealt with in therapy. Or if you enjoy it intensely and don't want to deal with it, then one has to accept the price of it and not complain about it. Creating difficulties for others, like petty things like destroying documents or files of others, spreading destructive information about the other, trying to destroy career of somebody. All this can be out of envy and narcissistic rage. Unconscious group dynamics, as we saw explained by Beyond, are at workplace, no doubt about it. And very important, the omnipotence, and this is more troublesome for people with personality disorders, especially narcissistic, those who are dependent with a secondary narcissism, and those who are OCPD with a secondary narcissism. This omnipotence at workplace creates a lot of difficulties. Overestimating one's capability and not then being able to accomplish the work. 2, behaving like a born CEO, or when that is frustrated, getting into envy and narcissistic rage in a destructive sense. And this omnipotence can be positively used also if positively the omnipotence can be projected on a leader. You start living through identification and you have extremely positive feelings towards the leader. In that sense, omnipotence can work both ways, destructively or constructively. This brings us to the management part of it, that if these are the difficulties and these are the psychoanalytic explanations, what to do about healing and managing. So much of it, part of it is managing the adult conscious rational part of us, and part of it is managing the unconscious. The larger story is of managing the unconscious. There is a deep existential and spiritual side to it also, because many will feel that life is not for spending 12 hours every day in a cubicle, or spending 12 hours trying to sell something on the road or in organizations. And this is something very banal when you compare this corporate activity with the lofty and sublime purpose of life. This looks very banal and far short of something that can convince us that this can be the purpose of life. So there is a deep existential and spiritual story associated to work And unless one explores the existential and spiritual dimensions, one cannot address, and if one addresses, in all probability, they will leave corporates. The existential and spiritual side brings us to the question, what is the optimum amount of work a man should do? And most people believe it is between 4 to 5 hours a day, not more than that. And this is inclusive of travel. Places like OSHO commune, Sri Aurobindo ashram, they have tried to create a lifestyle with this amount of work, and they are running quite fine. Because this gives adequate space for hobbies, social life, good health. Schopenhauer used to say about working 10 hours a day, that you spend your life doing stitching buttons 10 hours a day to purchase that dearly satisfaction of drawing breath. And therefore, the work world is a feudal, inhuman work world. It has been so, if you look at the history of workplace, it has been by and large a feudal, inhuman history. And in sophisticated versions, it continues even today. There was the myth of Sisyphus, which depicted this tragic situation of human beings at workplace. And Auroville, Osho commune, the Indian system of thought, they all have been for a balanced life and working not more than 4 to 5 hours a day. 4 hours is optimal. What it does is, because we are away from optimum, the anger, frustration, pain builds up which cannot be expressed. It is then deflected onto others, leading to interpersonal conflict, intra-group conflict, intergroup conflict, or conflict between larger social groups. Finally, we see the conflict on international scale and in terms of war. The anger builds in thousands small installments every day. And when it accumulates, it cannot be tolerated any further, becomes unbearable, it is catharted out in war. So the affect generation happens every day, largely at the workplace, secondarily in families and in society. And this, once affect is generated, a large part of that has to be repressed, cannot be expressed. And the repressed affect then has to be deflected on somebody, leading to destructive conflicts and wars. And to power that, some conscious reasons are manufactured, which are not real reasons at all. The real reason is the aggression in the unconscious, which is pent up slowly in small installments on an everyday basis. To overcome this, there have been experiments of hierarchy free leaderless groups, because the present hierarchical organizations are extremely feudal. So there have been experiments in leaderless groups, difficult to pull it off. I was a part of one such group, but it's very difficult not to have a leader with power and a veto and some domination on the group and yet make the group function. Very difficult to do it. So it's one of the problems for which we have not found a solution as yet. And we don't even know if there is a solution, but we hope to find one. Capitalism, therefore, has to graduate to social capitalism, and this has a psychological, cultural, spiritual, and social security aspect to it. Uh, I have detailed out social capitalism in one of my episodes. If you are interested, you can go through it. So this was the beginning today of applying psychoanalysis to the professional spaces. Over time, we will get into details of issues like fear of authority figures, catastrophic thinking, fear of attack at workplace, fear of, the rage at not getting credit and fame at the workplace, lack of meaning at the workplace, spiritual and existential aspects related to work. Thank you.